Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is DJ Brown, for those of you who do not know who I am. Hey, listen, man, this week I'm about to bring back to you guys worship. It's going to be part number 2. So just like always, I promise if you listen up, it'll only take a moment. So guys, this week, I really wanted to dive into and talk a little bit more about the intentions of our heart behind our worship. And I'm not here to try to judge anybody or anything like that, but I kind of wanted to shed light on that for those of us who kind of aren't aware to these things. And if you are, maybe we could look at it from a different angle. In Matthew chapter 15, Jesus refers to the Pharisees as hypocrites. And in that moment, Jesus gets frustrated because in an instance, they once again were holding on to religious ways and practicing things that weren't of God, even though they made it seem like they were following God's way, but they were really only following rules and religious practices. Now, how does this relate to what I'm saying about worship? Because after that, a few verses down, Jesus then says to them that what the prophet Isaiah said was correct, that they worship and they proclaim that they honor God from their lips, but their hearts are so far away. Now, the reason why this relates to worship is because directly when you use your mouth to sing out to God or profess out to God that you're honoring and in reverence of Him, but that your heart is so away, potentially you're doing the same exact thing that these Pharisees were doing. You're just following a practice and going back to a motion. And in this moment, I challenge everybody to think of the intent and why we worship in the first place. Because if we don't check why we're doing it, if it's not coming from a sincere place, if it's not truly coming from the heart, then we're not worshiping God in spirit or in truth, but we're worshiping Him out of obligation. Now that brings me to the next point and the final point that I want to address in this video. And that is that the difference for some people when it comes to worshiping alone or worshiping at church amongst other people. Now, there's two ways to look at this. For some people, worshiping at home causes them to have a true connection with God to where they are worshiping Him from their heart, because there's no pressure for other people to see them, and they can do it and cry out as loud and as much as they want to. And it comes from a true and sincere place. There's no audience, there's nobody who's watching, there's nobody who has an expectation. It's just them and God. But for other people, they only feel like they can do this at church. Now, I'm not going to say that those people are wrong because they feel like they can connect most with God at church. I'm not the judge, I'm not God. But what I will say is this: you have to be very careful, because if you're not careful and you're not being conscious of what the intent is behind your worship, you can easily get caught up like the Pharisees that I mentioned in Matthew chapter 15, where it just becomes a regular routine and you're doing it because you see other people. I encourage everyone that if you can find the space and you can find the time for God where you can cry out to Him, alone is better. But if you have to do it with a group of people, just make sure that every single time you do it, you're doing it with all you've got. So in the end, what I'm trying to say is that we can't allow our human nature to cause our worship to be in vain. We have to do it with the realest part of us and make the worship real. And this goes back to connecting with God through relationship part that I was speaking of in my last video. We have to really connect and allow it to be something real, because if we just allow it to be something that's in vain, we will be just like the Pharisees. But God doesn't want that. God wants us to connect with Him